Coming up, Ipswich Enviroplan marks 25 years this year. Its aim was to acquire key bushland to create conservation areas with funding from a green levy on rates. On the show, my special guest is former Ipswich councillor and chair of the Parks Committee in 1996, Gerard Pender. It's Thursday, September 30, 2021, and I'm Alan Roebuck. Welcome to Ipswich Today, which acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which it is produced and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. This podcast is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. Ipswich City Council's Enviroplan levy on rates started 25 years ago in 1996. It was created to set aside specific funds for council to buy bushland areas, which council calls conservation estates. One person who was there at the time of the introduction of the levy was former councillor Gerard Pender, and he joins me now to talk about the Enviroplan. Thanks for speaking with Ipswich Today, Gerard.
Thanks, Alan.
1996, it feels like an awful long time ago when you served as a councillor. I think it was from, 94 to 2000?
That's correct, yep.
Before we talk about the introduction of the levy, can you paint us a picture of Ipswich in the 1990s?
Well, from a council point of view, it was a time of great turmoil. There had been, on the political scene, the ructions in the Labor Party at that time. The council had split. There had been Dave Underwood running as an independent. We then had an amalgamation with the Moreton Shire. Then we had a partial attempt to de-amalgamate and some changes. And the merger of the two councils. So it was, from a council perspective, an enormously complex and difficult time.
So you had the organisation dealing with certain issues, and you also had councillors dealing with issues. Can you recall what the main ones were at the time and what the priorities were?
Look, it was it was all about the amalgamation issues. Which areas got priority, and as you might expect, people from the old Moreton Shire were concerned that they might be not treated as full rate-paying citizens, and then there was the enormous issues with Springfield, which was at that time being established, and all of the legal framework and agreements were being negotiated. So then there were concerns about how Springfield residents would compete with Ipswich residents, and who would be given preference and who wouldn't. So there were lots of those issues in the air at the time.
You were chair of Parks when the Enviroplan was introduced. Can you recall how that proposal came before the councillors and what sort of opposition you had at the time?
Yeah, it wasn't an easy process, Alan. I mean, some of the council officers at the time, Craig Maudsley, Dave Baker and others, were heavily involved and deserve at least as much credit as anyone else for establishing it. We looked at it in some detail. Green levies were not that unusual. There are other larger councils with them. We formed the view that, I formed the view with some of the officers that we should have one. The process was difficult and complex, and I suppose because of the amalgamation, there was a sort of a unique opportunity to set in place this sort of green planning for the future. And a lot of it was also prompted by the Springfield development and the enormous area involved there, and the enormous amount of green areas that we wanted to retain for public use.
Can you recall what that first levy was?
How much?
Yes.
No, look, I can't. I should have done my homework, Alan. You're going to tell me that...
No, I don't know. I know what it is today.
I know that some of my fellow councillors thought it was too much.
Well, that's what I was going to come to. There would have nobody wants to tell ratepayers they've got to pay more than they really have to. So that's probably part of those vigorous discussions that happened at the time.
Well, it is, and of course, any politician, and in a way, that's what we were, doesn't like to bring in a nice. I think it was referred to a nice big new green tax. Yes. I mean, you can imagine the sort of flack that you cop for doing that. Everyone wants to be seen to be low taxing and not imposing other obligations on ratepayers. But I thought, and others thought, that was the right thing to do, and we needed to have a specific levy and set aside funds so that the thing could be properly done and properly managed.
We're all smarter with hindsight, Gerard, and now there's over 7,000 hectares of natural bushland and growing. In 1996, did you think land acquisitions would be so extensive?
I hoped they would be. We had a vision about that whole southern rim of the Ipswich City Council area, all the way through from Greenbank into the rural areas, and having a continuous green area, wildlife corridors, scenic areas that weren't going to be interfered with or overly interfered with by development. So certainly I hoped and expected that over time there would be a significant holding by the council, and also significant support in other ways to secure areas.
One of the many strong points of the plan has to be the conservation partnerships with private landowners. Was this part of the original plan?
Yeah, it certainly was. Those things were pioneered in Ipswich at that time, and there were, a whole range of organisations we were working with, and we actively encouraged and established partnerships with, as an individual process, but also as a strategic network along with the Enviroplan, so that the whole thing worked properly.
You mentioned before that other councils did have green levies at the time, but of course now I think nearly every council does. And in Ipswich we have these magnificent areas like White Rock, Hardings Paddock, very, very popular with visitors looking for outdoor adventure. Did you think there'd be a tourism spin as well, or it was just all about conserving for the environment?
No, always thought there'd be the tourism spin. I mean, I walked all of those areas at the time with various council officers and families, and we looked at it on the ground, or I looked at it on the ground. I mean, I've always been interested in bushwalking. I thought that there's absolutely no reason these could not be popular walking areas for the public. I mean, it's a bit hard to imagine that when no one even knew where White Rock was, and you had to have a map to find it. But I could certainly see the potential, no doubt about that. And
now if we've got areas like Redbank Plains and those suburbs around Springfield Central, but basically on the doorstep of these green areas that are now going to be there forever.
That's right. I mean, and I suppose part of the challenge that councillors will now have is there'll no doubt be all kinds of attempts to pare back those green areas. Development will be, well, some will want to prioritise that and try and snip bits and pieces off. And I just hope that they've got the ability and foresight to hold the line on those green areas.
I think it would be a very courageous councillor that would want to start selling off those conservation estates.
Yeah, it's more, Alan, I think, the indirect effects of the surrounding development and all of the impacts that has, which are inevitable. I'm not anti-development. I voted for all the Springfield stuff at the time, but, there's got to be a balance, and there'll always be an attempt by the more aggressive part of the development sector to try and, get a bit more from those green areas, and I just think we need to make sure the balance is there.
Gerard Pender, congratulations on being there in 1996 and steering the conservation estates and the Enviroplan into reality, and thanks for speaking with Ipswich Today.
Thanks very much, Alan.
For more on the Ipswich Enviroplan, you'll find handy links in the show notes. Ipswich Today is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. This podcast is also listener-supported. Please make a once-only gift or regular donation to help keep it online. Just go to ipswichtoday.com.au and click the donate button on the homepage to make a payment through PayPal. Follow and stream this podcast from your favourite app, including iHeartRadio and Amazon Music Podcasts, or play Ipswich Today from smart speakers. Music is supplied by Purple Planet Music. This is Alan Roebuck. Thank you for listening.